Today we're going to be switching out the battery, the low voltage battery on our Tesla. And it tells you on here that it needs to be done. And you can get it to focus. So schedule service to replace low voltage battery. So first thing we need to do, make sure to keep the door open. We're gonna pop the frunk. And then we gotta take a few things out, but we'll step you through one step at a time.
All right, so what you're gonna do is go to your menu, go to safety, and there's a power off button right here. You're gonna wanna leave your door open or it'll lose the calibration.
So to do it right, we're going to remove the panel up in the top here, then the sides, and we're going to disconnect the high voltage battery, just to play it safe, where there's not any arcing from the high voltage battery trying to back power the 12 volt battery. So that connector, if I'm not mistaken, is somewhere up in here, but we'll find it in a minute. And we're also going to change out the HEPA filter and the cabin filter while we're at this.
This guy, there are some clips right here that you want to unclip, and then the same on the other side. This one's kind of tighter, you gotta reach your hand in. In this section, and then on the bottom here, you get some drain lines. You can just twist those off. That's just rubber tubing,
which is always too tight. All right, so then we're going to take off these side panels. They pop out. And sorry that they're cutting the grass and the whole world is doing everything every time we make a video. Right. So now we're going to release the trim at the very front.
You want to do this from both sides?
Yeah, do it from the sides and not the center for sure. And then we're going to get the carpet out of here, and it just releases from under there. There is a little part we have to connect for the emergency release here, or disconnect, sorry.
So it's right here.
And there are tools for these things that we bought at some point, and we really need to find, because it makes it so much easier to disconnect these goofy things. And then after you get that disconnected, the whole liner will just come out. So then after you've got that out, we will push those wires back through the tiny hole of this tub cavity. So next thing we got to do is take every single one of these 10mm bolts out. And then there's some plastic part here that will actually just, right here, that will pry up. And I believe this will come out at that point. So then we'll get a flathead screwdriver to pop these little guys out.
This point.
And it's just the typical things they've used on vehicles for many years. Easy to break, hard to find to replace. So then those are out. I believe we can just pick up. Hopefully there's not any more sensors. And there's the tub. So then this is going to be the access, once you take off, I guess, the front of it to where your HEPA filter is. Maybe not. But there's the battery. So we will figure out the HEPA filter part in a second. But there's the battery we're going to be switching out, and we're going to go back with a lithium instead of standard. So I was extremely confused because I know HEPA filters are usually here, but that's where it should have been. And I guess this vehicle did not have it. Or maybe it got serviced and they just didn't replace it. So we're going to make sure it fits. We will put it in there. We can take this loose. And while those parts are off, you can take a look, make sure there's no weird connection issues that's going on. Everything looks pretty good. As It's pretty cool how small a compressor is on this, since there's no engine and pulley system to have to do it. That's kind of crazy. But everything looks good here. So the next thing we're going to do in a minute is just disconnect the high voltage system to where there's no, like we talked about, backfeed to the battery. So to disconnect, you will just come over here, and it is your similar plastic tabs, and you disconnect, make sure those parts are apart from each other, and that should have the high voltage battery not backfeeding to this. So then, very similar to your old traditional batteries, we're going to get rid of this little 10mm bolt that holds this down, get rid of the one that's up here, and then we're going to disconnect and take the cover off, disconnect, and replace the battery, just like you would in a standard vehicle. So nothing extraordinary about this except disconnecting to make sure you're not backfeeding. So I've been having a few issues to where when you first turn this on, the air conditioner kicks on and then kicks off, and it stays off for about 3 or 4 minutes. So I'm going to disconnect our sensor here, and also going to disconnect the sensor here and reconnect them. But just thought it was interesting, the little air compressor and the manifold system they have for your suspension, if you have air suspension, is pretty neat looking. Similar to what you'd have on some smaller box trucks. So after we got that disconnected and we laid the battery terminals on plastic to make sure that we wouldn't ground out to metal, we will just take that battery and we will put it off to the side for now and grab the other battery and put it in its place. So this battery ends up weighing 20 pounds less and has some very cool features inside of it to where if you were to short it out with a tool, it internally shorts out and 10 minutes later resets itself.
So we've got everything hooked back together. I'm putting back in the brackets and tightening everything back up.
So for some reason on ours, there is a gap when this is down all the way. So we're gonna put something to secure. We just got some styrofoam that we're gonna put down to clamp down tight. That way this thing doesn't move around. But I mean, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but getting 20 pounds back could, over many, many thousands of miles, use a lot less electricity. So there is that. And always keep in mind, just like any vehicle, after you connect the positive first, when you do connect that ground, there's going to be a little bit of an arc of electricity, and that's it repowering the computers and repowering everything that it just kind of uses here. Even without that 300 volt, it's just pulling a draw from the battery. So there's that part, and then we're going to start putting everything back together. So we're going to put the cap back on the positive, then we're going to end up putting the air return back up here, and we'll actually install a filter. It'll be crazy. So then we actually have the HEPA filter that wasn't installed in this car, and it's gonna be really sad if this has never been fooled with. I'm the second owner if they just forgot to put this filter in from the factory, which could definitely be a possibility. So it shows which way the air needs to go. You'll definitely make sure to place that correctly into the filter holder, and after we put the hood back here, we will connect to get the rubber seals, and then we'll have a HEPA filter. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to reconnect our high voltage battery. That way it can go back, and then we're going to start putting the rest of the trim pieces back on. So real important on this piece to get all the gaskets to line up correctly. That way the air does guide through this filter. Since there is a filter now, and you can hear the vehicle starting to make a little bit of noise. It's probably turning on since I've got the key in my pocket. So make sure to put your release back through. That way you can connect it back once everything's back in. Or that'll be a lot of bolts having to come back out for no reason. Okay. So then you have to put the safety clips back in, there and there. And then we're gonna rebuild our little connector here for the, I guess in case a baby gets trapped in this container. I guess, has Tanner been in this one?
I haven't been in this one.
Yeah, this was pretty small. So feed it through your carpet, connect, and then there's the front part. And that has got that back, and then you just tuck it back in around the seals. So the rest of this is just getting everything popped back in the opposite of the way we took it off. And then you'll have a nicely sealed, nobody knows that it even looked like kind of an engine was in there. So your brake fluid, easy to get to now, but once you put the cover on it, the only thing that's really accessible under a Tesla hood is the windshield washer fluid. It's a lot of debate on brake fluid, whether you should change it out periodically. It does absorb water extremely well, so might be good if this thing sits around for 30 years of use to change out the brake fluid. That way you don't have water in your brake lines destroying your calipers. And since this is a 2017, thank goodness we actually use the brakes quite a bit, because a lot of these newer vehicles that are regen only, you hardly ever use the brakes and the calipers lock up. So we'll put this last bit on and see if we can show you how to do the inside cabin filter. Also very important, don't forget to reconnect your drain hoses, or the water that comes here off of the, what's that called, crowel? I can never remember the name of that. Would just leak and get all in everything, so make sure those are reconnected. So we are not going to change the cabin air filter. It does look like you end up having to pry all sorts of trim off, take a bunch of junk off. So now we got a HEPA filter. That's better than it was since it wasn't there. But if this was helpful, please hit like and subscribe. Have a great day.